In this 15-minute session, what I want to do is to identify for you what we've seen from the Forrester research. What are the factors that are really driving ERP software as a service adoption? I want to look at its impact on agility and innovation, and I want to connect that really to the rise of the networked economy. And in my final few minutes, I'm going to be bold enough to suggest to you an action plan. So let's move on and look at what's driving this ERP software as a service adoption. I would say that the further back we look, people talked a while ago about cost. People thought about cost. That's definitely not what's driving it now. What's driving it now is agility and speed. It's the ability to scale up and down. In an era of very cheap money, most large international firms have been growing by acquiring new business units. And those business units vary in size. They grow at different rates. They're in different locations. And what's really important for them is to be able to, first of all, implement in a very standard way, but also to be able to scale up and down. And if we go on to the next slide, we'll look a little bit more at some of the reasons that are driving this. So this impact on agility, and not just agility, but also innovation, is perhaps the most interesting factor. When we look at this slide, you can see that, yes, of course, some of them, some 68%, thought it might reduce their costs. But that was not really the most important factor. 75% are using software as a service to improve their agility. And here's an interesting thing. 72% are using speed of deployment itself as a benefit, the fact they can roll this out quickly and start in another location or a different business unit. And 71% say that software as a service is delivering new functions faster, so not waiting for release 99.9 of on-premise software, but being able to deliver this new functionality immediately. Let's go on to the next slide and look at the profound impact this can have on how firms operate internally. What I really want to draw your eye to here is, first of all, that software as a service applications and capabilities enable firms to innovate generally more quickly beyond IT. Why is that important? Is because most firms are really looking for a new way of relating to their customers. We think about this as being the age of the customer, and we see firms, all of them, having a kind of digital halo over what they do. It's not just physical stuff that they move. They're perhaps selling jet engines by the hour or tires by the mile. And having software as a service DRP gives them much more flexibility and agility around it. Secondly, software as a service applications enable changing the business processes to be on a given standard. And this is so important where you're growing a firm by making acquisitions. It enables you to get everybody playing from the same songbook. It enables you to cross-sell and upsell between business units, to have a common set of relationships with suppliers and customers. What else do we see? We see software as a service applications accelerated the adoption of mobile devices. Why is that? Because we don't have to plan anymore for the capacity that we have for an unknown number of calls perhaps to our application. We know as soon as you mobilize an application, people use it many more times they call on it. Well, when you move that to software as a service, that's all been virtualized in the cloud. You don't have to worry about it. What else? It improves collaboration with business partners who are using the same software as a service application. We'll look a bit further at this. It's what we call the network effect. Let's go on to the next slide and talk about, we've talked there a little bit about adopting software as a service, but why for ERP specifically? Well, first of all, for value. We talked a bit about this, the scalability across business units, the elasticity for growth and deployment in different locations and different speeds of growth. And all of you, if you're in perhaps a company that spans right across North America, or maybe internationally, you'll know that different parts grow at different speeds. But here's the important thing also, transparency. Software as a service for ERP provides terrific transparency and continuous real-time visibility into what's happening in each of these business units. What terms are they granting? What suppliers are they working with? Are they using our global terms for that? What's their order to cash cycle time? What's their on-time order and accuracy of delivery? That enables you to monitor and manage and standardize these enormous groups that have grown over time much more easily. Let's move on to the next slide, which we're going to talk about the rise of the networked economy. Now, here's what's pretty interesting. The cloud service usage is growing and growing. This more recent research that we did just last year, towards the end of last year, it shows that firms are thinking, generally speaking, that their use of cloud will increase. And why are they thinking that? It's because it's enabling them to drive much more interconnection and much more transformation of their business and the network of their business. If we look on the next slide, we'll talk a bit about the idea of transformation opportunities. What does that really mean? It means perhaps if we're using the same application, we belong to the same community, same B2B community. It enables us to, first of all, have a real-time engagement with our employees. That's where the mobile devices are coming in, with our partners, perhaps our customers' employees, our suppliers, but also with our customers. And it enables us to start pioneering and evaluating these new business models and creating new sources of value. I talked about the idea of perhaps this digital halo around everything we do, around transferring assets into services. There's a whole transformation in the economy around moving from ownership to consumption, and people value being charged for that. And you can see it with all kinds of capital equipment that people typically now have a lot of digital halo around. So one example, firm that I worked with was a company making scanning devices for medical purposes. What did they really want to do? They wanted to understand what each of the business units were doing with those, to know where they were installed, how often they were used, and to know how they were calibrated. They could only do that by having all of them on a common application, which was in the cloud. What does it also do? It enables you to aggregate information for much smarter processes and for analytics about, for example, what the customers think of a particular model that you might have brought out. What's your level of collaboration with a supplier across your worldwide business network? What's their on-time delivery? Is it a problem with the supplier overall, or is it just in a particular location? Let's move on to the next slide. So we talked there a little bit about what's driving this adoption. We've talked about some interesting things around the network economy. What should you be doing? What should your action plan be now? Well, perhaps you ought to start thinking about measuring an opportunity cost in your current ERP. What is the shortfall in agility? Who is waiting for the ability to perhaps scale up or scale back their operations in one of your countries or one of your locations? What about the ease of use and the value? How well matched is the value to what people want to pay? Are they buying a server that they don't really need? Are they buying a ton of licenses that they don't need in advance and in anticipation? And how easy is it for them to mobilize these applications? And what about scalability? If you have perhaps mobile applications which are calling on that ERP, how can you be sure that you can really support that? And what about upgrades? How many people are waiting for new functionality in the next release? So let's move on to the next one. And if we continue this action plan, those are the simple things that you can do. What are the higher value things that you can do? Look for much more strategic value. What would it mean if you had a simple way for all your customers to be able to order once from you, all the products in all the business units, perhaps to get a single invoice and a single set of terms? What would it mean for your CFO if they weren't able to get different terms in different business units and then perhaps extend their terms of credit? What about being able to manage your suppliers more closely and get perhaps economies of scale dealing with them? And what about new business models, new sources of value, being able to create a community amongst all of your customers so they can share ideas? And what about aggregating information to enable much smarter processes that you might have between you, perhaps for managing more effective trade promotions? If we go on to the next slide, you'll see all the reports that I drew this insight from. And on the next slide, you've got my contact details. If you want to contact me, I'd be very happy to share that information with you. So please feel free to give me a call or send me an email.